Thank you for the invitation to share my testimonies on how the power of faith can help in the long struggle to rehabilitate victims. I will be very glad to share with this webinar what we have been doing so far towards rehabilitation of victims of trafficking. Let me begin with a bit of introduction. I am Sister Olivia Umoh. I'm a daughter of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul. I'm a Nigerian national working in Ghana as a missionary for the last 12 years. I'm the director of Self-Child Advocacy of the Catholic Archdiocese of Kumasi, a social service institution owned by the Diocese of Kumasi under the management of the Daughters of Charity of St. Vincent de Paul since its inception in 2005. The outline of my presentation is very simple. I'll give a little introduction, which I have started, and then I will talk about actions that we are taking towards rehabilitation of victims, and then the power of faith, how the power of faith has accompanied us in this struggle, and then I will conclude. Let's talk about the target group and service areas that we cover. As I said, children in street situation are our major targets. Children in street situation in Kumasi are migrant children who come from very poor, vulnerable backgrounds in the northern part of Ghana generally, and also in other parts of Ghana. But the majority of them migrate from the far north of Ghana in search of livelihood in the cities. They are made to believe that there is a lot of money in the cities and they can make money to survive in the cities. Of course, there is some element of truth in that. So children from the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and above, up to 25 young adults, come into Kumasi, living on the streets with no protection, no shelter, exposed to all forms of abuses, violence, and sometimes fall victims to human trafficking. We work to support these children while on the streets, to also rehabilitate them, get them off the streets, and support them, learn skills, give them access to formal education. In fact, currently as I speak, we are supporting over 600 children in street situation in various development activities, including formal education and livelihood empowerment. We support and work with victims of domestic violence and children and young persons in abusive situations. Today, I want to talk about our interventions with victims and survivors of human trafficking and the way we support their rehabilitation. The photo there is showing children living on the streets, struggling for livelihood. Before speaking about our rehabilitation activities or interventions with victims of human trafficking, permit me to give a brief context of human trafficking in Ghana. Ghana is a source, a transit, and a destination country for human trafficking, meaning that Ghanaian children or youths are trafficked to different parts of the world, including Saudi Arabia, Libya, Lebanon, Ivory Coast, Mali, and are taken through Ghana to other neighboring countries. Also, children, women, and youths from other neighboring African countries are also trafficked through Ghana That makes it a transit. And sometimes into Ghana and forced into prostitution within Ghana. That makes it a destination. And these are the people that often we are there. We see, we meet, who escape and come to us, and who we work towards rescuing. As well as Ghanaians who are trafficked outside. When we get calls, we also work with other networks to rescue and to rehabilitate them. Within Ghana, we also have internal trafficking of children and minors, where children are taken from their poor families with fancy offers of access to formal education or skill training, but instead are subjected to forced labor, to abuses, to prostitution, and often they end up on the streets, engaged in casual jobs on the streets, begging, hawking, and sometimes commercial sex work for survival. Some of these victims manage to escape from their traffickers within days, weeks, and months after they have been trafficked. Others suffer under their traffickers and only are left free after they paid their ransoms. Most survivors run to the police for help, and others come to us directly through the help of other people, sometimes other networks, other organizations. We are also sometimes directly involved in rescue activities of victims with the police, of course. This photo you are seeing is one of our rescue exercise where we were notified of young people, hundreds of young people from French-speaking countries who have been trafficked into Ghana and brainwashed and made to bring other people from their neighborhood, their friends, and their siblings. Actions that we take to support these victims towards rehabilitation. We are largely involved in rescue of victims, as I've mentioned earlier. We provide psychosocial support to survivors. We provide shelter, safe shelter, where survivors can live for the period they are struggling with their trauma until they are ready to transit to return to their families or countries of origin. We support transportation of victims when they are ready to go back to their families. Reintegration is a major aspect of rehabilitation activities we carry out. We do this directly, and we also work with other networks in other countries, such as the Talitakum network in neighboring countries, and with sisters of other congregations like the Sisters of St. Louis, like the Daughters of Charity in other countries like in Nigeria, because we do rescue a number of Nigerian girls. They support us with the rehabilitation and reintegration of these children or young people in their home countries after they have been helped to return. We support victims' rehabilitation with livelihood and education empowerment. Some of the photos you will be seeing are the support, the livelihood support of survivors. We follow up survivors in their communities, in their families, sometimes through networking with other organizations, institutions, and Catholic sisters. We provide family and community support by going into communities to educate communities against trafficking, educate families, help families to understand human trafficking and the schemings, and to support their survivors. We also provide spiritual accompaniment for victims and survivors. This we do through prayers, praying with them, and also encouraging them in their faith journey. We work to reduce vulnerability of young people to human trafficking, and this we do by providing access to formal education and skill training for young persons in vulnerable situations to avoid them even being trafficked. The power of faith cannot be overemphasized in our struggle to the long journey of rehabilitation. Faith is our driving force in working to combat human trafficking, which is such an overwhelming phenomenon. Faith sustains us as we listen to the heartbreaking and scary stories of victims. Sometimes we do not have the needed resources to support the demands of victims or survivors, but our faith in the divine providence energizes us to open our arms and doors to welcome victims and survivors. We cannot overlook the power of faith of the victims and survivors themselves, who, despite being broken, are ever resilient, hopeful, and determined to rise again and take position in society. It is the power of faith that helps us and the survivors to make the long journey towards rehabilitation. In the end, it is a struggle worth the trouble. As we can see in the testimonies of so many, like Ikaete, Ugomma, and all of the others that have survived this terrible evil. The power of faith has helped us greatly and as survivors in this struggle towards rehabilitation. To conclude, I would like to note the power of networking and collaboration, which is really our deepest faith around combating human trafficking and rehabilitation of victims and survivors. We believe that together we can fight human trafficking. That is our deepest faith. Together, only together, we can combat this crime. Together, we can truly rehabilitate victims, because where we stop, others can continue. And so, we are very passionate in networking and collaborating with like-minded organizations. We built and formed a network of Catholic sisters in Ghana and in other African countries against human trafficking through the Talitha Kum network. We network with various organizations and institutions within Ghana, including the government agencies, the anti-trafficking unit of the Ghana Police Force, religious bodies, the Muslim community, the Catholic communities, the the traditional institutions to combat human trafficking. Our deep faith in this struggle is that together we can fight human trafficking. Thank you so much for giving me this time and this opportunity to share our testimony.